As the effects of the Dragon Yuan pill took hold, the elemental energy dragon behind him grew immense, its eyes glowing intensely as it signaled its readiness to attack. He assumed an offensive stance, stomping forcefully on the ground, shattering it into pieces. Gripping his sword tightly, he fixed his fierce gaze on Zhang, determined to end him once and for all. His energy surged so powerfully that the surrounding rocks began to levitate. Zhang, staring at the dragon, felt a wave of terror. He was uncertain whether he could withstand such an attack. Meanwhile, the blue-haired warrior unsheathed his sword, preparing to strike. This time, he resolved to use the second technique of the 9 conquering styles. Channeling his strength, he unleashed the descending dragon's cut, sending a devastating slash toward Zhang. Instantly, his body radiated powerful energy, and the elemental dragon surged forward at lightning speed, its maw widening to consume Zhang. At that moment, a young woman stepped in front of Zhang, extending her hands with a determined expression. She summoned the Earth Eternal Shield once more. Zhang, shielding his face with his elbow, turned to her in astonishment. Despite her injuries, she was willing to take another devastating blow. A green shield manifested around them just as the spiritual dragon struck, shattering part of the ground and engulfing the battlefield in dust and debris. As she struggled to maintain the shield, her hands trembled, and she clenched her teeth. She explained to Zhang that the warrior had consumed the Z family's secret Dragon Yuan pill, exponentially amplifying the dragon's power. Her shield, already weakened, would not hold for long. They were moments away from doom. The cracks in the shield widened, and realizing the imminent collapse, she mustered her last ounce of strength to prolong their survival. Zhang grasped his cloak and observed the spiritual dragon in awe. The blue-haired warrior was far stronger than he had anticipated. Every strike from the dragon carried lethal force. The previous attack had already been overwhelming, he hadn't expected another at this magnitude. The blue-haired warrior leaped toward them, smirking as he saw the shield breaking apart. He unleashed multiple descending dragon cuts, launching a series of ferocious slashes at the shield. Zhang narrowed his eyes, raising his hand toward the sky. In response, he activated the swarm of insects mark. Deciding to show no mercy, he prepared his next move. As the girl's shield finally shattered, thousands of insects emerged from Zhang's palm, swarming into the air. The blue-haired warrior looked up, eyes widening in shock at the sheer number of insects. Clenching his teeth, he tried to comprehend what was happening. As the insects multiplied, Zhang locked eyes with his opponent. "Prepare yourself," he warned. The wounded girl, seated on the ground, pressed a hand to her injured shoulder. She stared at Zhang in disbelief, questioning whether he truly belonged to the legendary creation class. The insects encircled Zhang, their sights set on the blue-haired warrior. Zhang stepped forward and commanded the swarm to attack. Realizing the impending danger, the warrior clenched his jaw in panic. He knew that if the insects struck all at once, he stood no chance. As the swarm charged, he drew his sword and took a defensive stance. With a serious expression, he steeled himself and once again invoked the descending dragon cut. His blade crackled with energy, slicing through the incoming insects. But Zhang had another trick up his sleeve. As the insects were severed, their bodies began regenerating instantly. The warrior's eyes widened in disbelief. "Impossible," he muttered, watching the insects recover and advance again. Desperately, he continued to cut them down, but they would not stay dead. Zhang smirked, releasing a poisonous mist from his body. Extending his hand, he coldly asked, "Do you still think you can win?" The blue-haired warrior hesitated, his confidence wavering. More insects swarmed around him, and the girl behind Zhang watched in stunned silence, awestruck by his power. Enraged by Zhang's taunts, the blue-haired warrior swung his sword furiously, once again summoning the descending dragon cut. He cleaved an insect in half, but the spiritual dragon manifested once more. Opening its massive jaws, the dragon began devouring the insects, preventing them from regenerating. It was a strategic counterattack. However, amidst the chaos, an unnoticed insect struck from behind, sinking its fangs into the warrior's arm. A sharp pain shot through him as poison coursed into his veins, forcing him to drop his sword. He spun around, eyes blazing with desperation. "This isn't good." he thought, realizing that with his sword hand poisoned, he was now vulnerable. With no other option, he reached into his garments and pulled out a glowing red object. The insects, sensing an opportunity, rushed toward him. But before they could strike, he raised the object high and activated the jade protection of life. Instantly, a brilliant red energy enveloped his body, forming an impenetrable shield. He sneered at Zhang. "Did you truly think you could kill the great Xiao Yuan Wu with a mere swarm of insects?" Zhang simply remained silent while the insects continued to attack the shield. Yuan Wu began to approach them. Upon seeing that he was able to control the insects and bring him to the point of using the ancestral treasure, he couldn't help but praise him for being amazing. He also added that even if Zhang used all his cards up his sleeve, he wouldn't be able to harm him. Seeing the man approaching, the girl stood up and grabbed Zhang by his clothes. Within seconds, he started bleeding from his mouth and approached Zhang with a smile. He decided to make him an offer one last time. As long as Zhang was willing to follow and obey him, he could allow him to join the Zhao family and grant him the Z surname, something many dreamed of achieving. After saying this, he asked Zhang to think it over carefully and not miss out on this opportunity. Zhang began to look at him with a calm gaze and remained silent. Thinking for several seconds, he started to stare fixedly at Yuan Wu and couldn't help but get angry when he saw that he had become accustomed to being conceited to the point where he couldn't even see the situation he was in. Upon hearing this, the girl turned her head towards him, and with a confused look, began to wonder what Zhang was up to. He approached Zhang, extended his hand to the side, and with a smile, asked him to stop bragging. It didn't matter to him if Zhang accepted or not, because even if he couldn't kill him today, he could do it any other day. With the influence of the Xiao family throughout the country, he wouldn't be able to hide or confront them. Zhang began to stare at Yuan Wu intently, and with a smile, he reminded him of his own words that one couldn't investigate if there was nothing to find. After saying this, he asked him what could happen if he died without leaving any trace. At that moment, a giant tentacle struck the ground. Upon hearing this sound, Yuan Wu slightly turned his head back, and with a gaze filled with terror, he started wondering what was happening. This tentacle belonged to the insect mother. She emerged from the swarm of insects and appeared behind them. Upon seeing how enormous she was, the girl fell to the ground. Yuan Wu looked up, and upon seeing how huge and terrifying she was, he started sweating. At that moment, Zhang gave her the order to devour him. Upon hearing his command, Little Nine began to approach Yuan Wu and thanked Zhang, as she was very hungry. Upon hearing this, Yuan Wu's expression changed drastically. He started feeling a fear that he had never felt before in his life. Little Nine began to smile and, using her tentacle, attacked Yuan Wu's shield. Due to her enormous strength, his body was sent flying and crashed into the wall, breaking it into pieces. He started screaming in agony, unable to believe that a monster like Little Nine actually existed. He asked Zhang what kind of monster she was. With a calm look, Zhang explained to him that Little Nine had just finished reproducing herself, so he and the jade were exactly what she needed to satisfy her hunger. Little Nine began to repeatedly hit Yuan Wu using her tentacle, creating a large curtain of smoke in the process. In a matter of seconds, the shield started breaking into pieces. He opened his mouth and started screaming in pain, questioning why the shield had broken so easily. He began to bleed from his mouth and fell to the ground. He couldn't believe that this was happening. Now the fate of the Z family and the jade were going to disappear. Now that the shield had been broken, Little Nine started to stare at him intently. She began to bring her tentacle closer to him and decided to deliver the final blow. With a cold expression, Zhang remained silently observing this. Little Nine attacked Yuan Wu, destroying the ground into pieces in the process. Her attack had been so powerful that all that was left of Yuan Wu was a pool of blood. She began to lift the tentacle from the ground, and Zhang thought that no one should find out about this. Since Yuan Wu was now dead, he started walking, reached his hand towards the sky, activated the swarm mark, and gave Little Nine the order to transform. Several seconds later, Little Nine transformed, returned to human form, and hugged him. Then she closed her eyes and, with a smile, explained that Yuan Wu was delicious. She thanked him and also added that she was the one who loved him the most. The girl who was sitting on the floor turned her head to the side, and upon seeing Little Nine, she couldn't help but feel somewhat confused and scared. Zhang turned his back on her, started to walk away, and decided to take a look at the Z family. At that moment, he turned his head towards her and decided to take care of her. The girl who was sitting on the floor panicked and couldn't help but sweat. She remembered that she now knew his secret, and thinking about this, she couldn't help but wonder if he was going to kill her to keep her silent. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.